Welcome to Shas Illuminated. Please enjoy the following shiur.
Today's shiur in Siman Kuf Lamed Aleph. We are up to Sif Beis, which is the top of page Yud Beis, immediately following page 22. The Mechaber says in Sif Beis, Nefilas Apayim Miyushav Velo Mu'umud. Tachanon, Nefilas Apayim should be said sitting down and should not be said standing up. Says the Rama, Yesh Omrin de'ein nefilas apayim ela b'makom sheyesh aron v'sefer Torah b'socho. That some say that nefilas apayim only takes place in a place where there is an aron kodesh with a sefer Torah inside of it. Aval below ze omrim tchina below kisui panim v'chein ohagim. But if there is no aron with a sefer Torah inside of it, then you will say the tefillah, but you will not say it with your head down without kisui panim. V'chein ohagim, and that is the minhag. V'chatzar beis hakneses hapasuach lebeis hakneses, a courtyard of a shul that is opened up to the shul. O b'shah she'atzibur mispalin, or if you are not in shul but you are davening at the same time that the tzibur is davening. Oz afilu yochid bebeso omer tchina b'nefilas apayim. Then even an individual in his house could say tachna with nefilas apayim because he's davening at the same time as the tzibur, or he's in the chatzar beis hakneses that's opened up into the beis hakneses, and we'll see more details about all these halachos in the Mishnah Berurah. Let's begin the Mishnah Berurah with Sifkaton Yud. We said nefilas apayim is miyusha v'lo mu'umud. Kasav Beis Yosef shatam hu al derech HaKabbalah. The Beis Yosef says the reason why we say tachnon sitting down is al derech HaKabbalah. Uva Rivash kasav she'en kpeda. The Rivash says there's absolutely no kpeda to say tachnon sitting down. Kasva ha'achron the achonim right b'shas atchak in a pressing situation. Nucha lismoch al harivash. We can rely on the Rivash and we can say tachnon standing up. V'alkein, and therefore he's going to give us a couple of examples why it's a shas, when it's a shas adchak, where you have to say tachanon standing. The alkein, therefore, im siyem tfiloso. If you finish your Shemona Esrei, v'tzarach lamod al kol panim kedei hiloch val ramos. And as we learned, when you take it 3 steps back, at the very least, you have to wait as long as the time it takes to walk 4 amos. So you're waiting the time it takes to walk 4 amos. V'kodem shiur34723siman13123 hischel lo tachanon. And before that time is up, the tzibur starts saying tachanon. Then yamod sham b'mekomo v'yipo al ponav mu'umarim hatzibur. Then you should stand in your place and you should say tachanon standing with the tzibur. Now I see from here an interesting thing also is that there's obviously an idea to start tachanon exactly with the tzibur, because how long does it take to walk 4 amos? A couple of seconds. So you took your steps back and you have to wait there 2 seconds and they start saying tachanon. So you can't even wait the extra second to be able to walk forward, to sit down. We say tachanon standing. So you see, clearly there's an inyan to start right away with the tzibur without wasting any time. But if you look at note 13, he points out that which the Mishnah Berurah just said, that you should stand in your place and say tachanon standing with the tzibur. Rav Chaim Kanievsky explains shemistaber she'ein kavanas the Mishnah Berurah lomar shelo yeshev b'makom shepasa. The Mishnah Berurah does not mean to say that you shouldn't sit down in the place where you took your 3 steps back. Ela sha'af im ein be'efsharuso lashev esham. Just if there is no option of sitting there, then lo yachzor l'makomo, you shouldn't go back to your original place. You shouldn't take a 3 steps up. Ela yomer nefilas apayim b'mida, then you should stand. So clearly from Rav Chaim Kanievsky, it's clear that if you took a 3 steps back and they started saying tachanon before you're allowed to move back up, you could sit down in that place. There's an Indian not to take the steps back up too fast. Like we learned, it's not respectful. It's like a dog going back to his kia. It's not appropriate. But over here, if you could sit down in the place where you took a 3 steps back, that would be okay. But what the Mishnah Berurah means, according to Chaim Kanievsky, is that if there's nowhere to sit in the 3 steps back, and it's too early to take it 3 steps up, then you could say the tachanon standing. That's example number 1 the Mishnah Berurah gives of a shas adchak, where one would say tachanon standing. Number 2, he writes in the Mishnah Berurah, v'cheinim acher omeid negdo u'mispalo Shemona Esrei. So too, if there's a person across from you, behind you, that is saying Shemona Esrei, v'aser leyesh omrim leishev negdo afilu kimlo einov. And we learned there was one opinion that says that even if you're davening, you can't sit down if you're anywhere in his eyes reach, if you are directly in front of him. So therefore there's a person that's davening, 10 feet behind you, you can't sit down directly in front of him, even if it's 10 feet away. And for some reason you can't move to the sides, maybe there are other people davening there that you can't go to the sides. So you can't sit, you can't move to the sides. Yipo al ponav mu'umad. In that case also, you will say tachanon while you are standing. You'll lean on your arm while you are standing. V'chein kol ki agafna, and so too any other example that one can come up with. If it's a shas adchak and he can't sit down, he would say tachanon standing. Then the Mishabura goes, and that which the Ramah told us, that there is an opinion that says that one should not say do Nefilas Apayim except in a place where there is an Aron and a Sefer Torah inside of it. Says the Mishabura, Aron lav dafka, that we don't really care that there's an Aron. Elahu adin Sefer Torah l'chudai. It's enough that there's a Sefer Torah there that you could do Nefilas Apayim when there is a Sefer Torah. V'tama yesh omrim, the reason for this opinion of why you do not do Nefilas Apayim unless there is a Sefer Torah, mishum d'matzinu bakra remesh in the filahi lifnei Aron Hashem, because we see from a pasuk that there is a remez that the falling on your face is in front of the Aron of Hashem, u'kediksiv b'melchemes ha'ai, like it's written by the Melchama of Ha'ai, v'yipol al ponav lifnei Aron Hashem, that Yoshua fell on his face in front of the Aron of Hashem. V'im ein sham Sefer Torah rak shar svarim, but if there is no Sefer Torah there, only other svarim, das el yerabba v'derach hachayim delo yipol al ponav. They say if there's only regular svarim and there's no Sefer Torah, one should not do Nefilas Apayim. Rak yomer ha-mizmor below Nefilas Apayim, but you would still say tachlon, you just would not do the Nefilas Apayim aspect. V'yesh chokim bazeh, and there are those who argue and say, even if there is no Sefer Torah, but there are other svarim there, that you can do Nefilas Apayim. Nefilas Apayim. Uvamakom sheyesh Sefer Torah l'kul afilu yocha bebeis nofel al apov. In a place where there is a Sefer Torah, everyone agrees, even if it's an individual in his house, if there's a Sefer Torah in the house, he would do Nefilas Apayim. Now let's see a few interesting notes. First of all, the Mishabura started off and told us that the Aron is lav dafka. The main thing is the Sefer Torah, but it's interesting because the pasuk they bring is they bow down in front of the Aron of Hashem. But I guess they understand that to mean the bowing down is really because the Torah was there, not so much of the Aron. But if you look at the notes, if we begin with note number 15, he writes, I'm going to start from the second paragraph of note 15. U'b'mekomo sherak bebeis v'hei mevi'in es ha-sefer Torah la'aron. In a place where only on Monday and Thursday they bring the Sefer Torah to the Aron. Ubizman acher nimtza b'makom yoser shamor. But when it's not a laning day, they keep the Torah somewhere else where it's guarded better. The Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says sheyesh lahakel lipol al paneihem af sheka'es eina Sefer Torah b'socho. So Shlomo Zalman says that you could be lenient in doing the Nefilas Apayim even when the Sefer Torah is not there, because it is brought there for laning, just for protective reasons, it's kept somewhere else, that's considered a Sefer Torah there, and then just with the Aron, you could do Nefilas Apayim. V'chein mokom shezminu lebeis hakneses. So to a place that they designated it to be a shul, v'adayin lo espiku lahachnis bo Sefer Torah, they just did not get a chance yet to bring the Sefer Torah into the place that's going to be the shul. V'shom Zalman Auerbach paskin shemistaver she'ein lahakbid v'tzrichim lomer tachlonon. That one should not be makbid, even though the Sefer Torah is not there yet, it's going to be there, and therefore you would be able to say tachanun. That's point number 1 that we see in the notes. And then we see in note number 16, on that which we saw in the Mishabura, that the reason why there should be a Sefer Torah is because of the pasuk in Yoshua. So note 16 he writes, Umitam zeh kosav agon Tukachinsky, Sheminog Yerushalayim lipo nefilas apayim afilu b'makom she'ein Sefer Torah. That based on this, the minog in Yerushalayim is to do Nefilas Apayim even in a place where there is no Sefer Torah. Mishum shebi Yerushalayim kol makom nikra l'fnei Hashem. Since the pasuk is that they fell on their faces l'fnei Aron Hashem, so Yerushalayim, where Hashem resides, much stronger, says always l'fnei Hashem. V'chein kosav, Moshe writes the same thing, and he adds on, she'ein hanhagu zu nechsheves shinui minog. That is not considered a change of the minog. Even though where you come from, you don't say tachanun, you don't do Nefilas Apayim when there is no Sefer Torah there. However, when you come to Yerushalayim, that's how you should be knowing, and everyone should say tachanun with Nefilas Apayim, even when there is no Sefer Torah, because that's considered l'fnei Hashem. Umipnei shatamu mishum kedusas Yerushalayim, and because the reason is because of the special kedusha in Yerushalayim, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach paskins sheyesh lino kain rak b'Yerushalayim sheben achomos hamukdashos v'kedushas Yerushalayim. Now this minog should dafka be in the Yerushalayim where there are walls around it, where it has a special kedusha of Yerushalayim. V'lo b'mekomos achadoshim, not the outlying areas that we call Yerushalayim that are not included in the wall. Even though Shlomo Zalman says that's the way you should be knowing, but l'maisa the minog is shebechol Yerushalayim av shelo b'soch hachomos, that all over Yerushalayim, even not within the walls, no hagim shenofum al paneim afilu she'ein Sefer Torah. The minog is to do Nefilas Apayim even when there is no Sefer Torah. Ulam b'tshuva hosef, but Shlomo Zalman adds in the tshuva shamedaktikim no hagim mechutz l'chomos la'omro below Nefilas Apayim. And those who are medaktik are noheg outside the walls to say tachanun, in fact, without Nefilas Apayim. So the minog is to do it with Nefilas Apayim even outside the walls, but one who wants to be medaktik should not do it outside the walls if there's no Sefer Torah there. The next point we said in the Mishabura was the machlokes of you have other svarim there and not a Sefer Torah, so we brought down from the El Yerabah and Derech Chaim that you don't do Nefilas HaPayim. And then we said the Eish Chokim Bazeh. So if you look at note number 17, it points out V'chein Nog HaStipler L'maisa. That's how the stipler is Nog L'maisa. Shenofel Al Ponov B'chedro Av Shelo Hoyo Shem Sefer Torah. He would do Nefilas HaPayim in his room where he learned, even though there was no Sefer Torah there. Keven Shehoyu Sham Svarim. Since it was Svarim there, he held that was good enough. And so too holds Rav Nissen Karelitz. The host of Rav Nissen Karelitz adds on, Shezeh dafka b'mokom she'asvarim munachim bo b'ofen kavua. It has to be that the svarim are there in a permanent fashion on the shelves, not that you just brought in a few svarim in order to do Nefilas HaPayim, but if the svarim are there, like the discipler, he holds that would be okay. U'b'mokom she'mechanchem es hakatanim l'Nefilas HaPayim. If there's some kind of room that kids are davening in, and there are no svarim, and there's no Sefer Torah, but you're training the children how to do Nefilas HaPayim, if Moshe says, Sheyesh l'hakel kedei azu, then you could be lenient. Actually, I'm sorry. Sheyesh l'hakel kedei azu, you could be even like this opinion that if there are svarim there, then it's okay. So you would be able to train the children to do Seitachah with Nefilas HaPayim if there are svarim there, even though there is no Sefer Torah there. Continues the Mishabura in Tzivkoton Yud Beis. We said in the Ramah that there are those who say that you don't do Nefilas HaPayim in a place where there's no Sefer Torah, but if there, in fact, is no Sefer Torah, you would not do Kisui Panim, but you would say the actual Tefillah. Says the Mishabura, what does it mean below Kisui Panim? Hu Nefilas HaPayim Shalanu. That covering of the face is on Nefilas HaPayim, that's the way we do it. So you would skip the falling on your face, the leaning on your arm, you would skip that, but you would still say Tachanun. And then the Ramah told us that the courtyard of a Beis HaKnesses that's open to a Beis HaKnesses, you can say Tachanun with Nefilas HaPayim. Says the Mishabura in Tzivkoton Yud Gimel, Hainu de be'esh shehispalul b'chotzer have a Pesach Beis HaKnesses pasuach. This is talking about a case that at the time that you're davening in the courtyard of the shul, the entranceway is open to the shul, v'nucha liros me'oso tzad makom ha'aron. And you could actually see from where you are in the chutzner through the opening to where the aron is, in which they keep the Sefer Torah, have kim mispal l'fnei ha'aron. That's considered davening in front of the aron, in which you could say Tachanun with Nefilas HaPayim even in the chutzner. Which is not the case if you're davening in the courtyard, but on other sides, like for example, the opening of the shul is in the west, right? The aron is in the east. The opening of the shul is in the west. But the azara, the room outside of the shul, is very wide, and it extends also to the south. You're davening on the southern side of the azara. The ain't sham Sefer Torah, and there's no Sefer Torah in the azar that you're davening. Ain't certain Nefilas HaPayim. In that case, you're not connected to the shul. You can't see in. You can't see the aron. That's not connected to the aron, to the Sefer Torah, and therefore you would not say Tachanun with Nefilas HaPayim. V'hu adinim hoya pesach Beis HaKnesses. No, so too if the door that connects the chutzner that you're in to the shul is closed and locked. Afilu mispal b'chutzner negdo. Even if you're davening in the courtyard right across from where the entrance is, right across from where the aron is, and theoretically if it would be open, you'd be able to see it, but the door is closed. Ain't certain Nefilas HaPayim also in that case. So it's mamish that you have to be able to see the aron, otherwise it's not going to be good. Kosvu ha'achron, the achronim right. The imu mispal be'ezes noshim. If one is davening in the women's section, gam kein certain Nefilas HaPayim, you also do Tachanun with Nefilas HaPayim. Kevan sheyuchal liros me'achalonos mokom ha'aron. Since you are able to see from the windows the place of the aron, that's considered a view of the aron, that's okay. And note 18 he points out, va'afim yesham vilon, even if there's some kind of shade over there that's blocking for the ezes noshim, the Das Torah writes, Shenel Shav Kipasua, that's considered open, that's going to be okay. The poskim also say that if you're on the side or the door is closed, but there's a window in the door, like many doors have, that also would be okay. The same way that that Ezras Nashim you're seeing through a window, so if you're in the chutzner of the Beis HaKnesses and you're able to see through a window that goes into the shul, that also will be okay as long as you can see the aron where the Sefer Torah is. You're considered to be in the place of the aron, and you could say Tachanun with Nefilas HaPayim. The Ramah said two things. Not only the Chatzor Beis HaKnesses that's open to the Beis HaKnesses, he said, O B'shah Shatzivur Mispalim, or if you're davening not in shul, at the same time that Tzivur is davening, as we said, Afilu Yachid Bebeso Omer Tchina B'Nefilas HaPayim, that even an individual davening in his house could say Tachanun with Nefilas HaPayim. Says the Mishabura Sefkatan Yudalad Afilu Yachid Bebeso, even an individual in his house, Mashma da'afilu hu rachuk mi beis hakneses. It's mashma that even if his house is far away from the shul, gam kein nofel alapov. If he's davening the same time as it's tzibur, he could do in the filas apayim. V'nei lefia mavur b'simen nun hey sivchaf. But according to what we learned earlier in simen nun hey sivchaf, ayri hacha she'ein sham tinuf mafsik ben beisol beis hakneses. We have to say we're discussing over here a case where there's nothing dirty, nothing smelly that's separating between you and where the shul is. Because we learned earlier about answering kaddish, it'll be mitzarif. So if there's stuff in between that smells, or there's avodah zarah in between, things like that, that would be mafsik. So over here, even though we're saying you're in a separate house, but you're davening at the same time, it would have to be that it's near the shul, and you know there's no tinuf that is separating between your house and the shul. But then we said in these cases, you would be able to say tachana with nefilas apayim, but the Mishnah Berurah adds on a very important akudah over here, which makes it very unlikely for it to work out in the case where you're in a different house, and you're davening at the same time as the shul. It's like the Mishnah Berurah, Sekatan Tezvav, v'hu shat tzibur gam kein omrim tachanim b'shah zo. It has to be not only that you're davening the same time as the minyan, you're saying tachanun the same time as the shul. Now that's very hard to know unless you have a shul that's very exacting, very yekish, and they're very exacting on exactly how long each thing takes, and you know exactly when tachanun is going to be. Otherwise, it's not really so practical to know exactly how slow the chazan was going or how fast, how long they waited for a minyan, whatever it is. So that wouldn't be so pashik, because the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here, it's not enough that you're davening at the same time, it has to be that you're saying tachanun at the same time. Then even if you're in a different house, as long as there's no tinaf bimasik between your house and the shul, you could say nefilas apayim even though you are not with a sefer Torah. That is the end of Sif Beis.
So by the Kaisel nowadays, where the alcove is open, that's enough for you to say tachanun outside where there's no urn?
Yeah, first of all, there usually is an urn outside also.
So not in the winter?
Not in the winter, probably not at mincha also. Probably not at mincha. I would think that's okay. That's a good question. I would, besides the fact that you have the Het of Yerushalayim, which is a very good point, Yechiel, but even without the Het of Yerushalayim, the fact that you could see inside, you could see the Aron, that would be like this case that you're right in the chutzner and you see that. Yeah, that would be something. Right. But Yechiel's right. We don't come on to that even. Zoti Shulchan Aruch Sif Gimel. Ein nefilas apayim balayla. There is no nefilas apayim falling on the face at night. Ubelele ashmores nohagan lipal al pneim. But in the late hours of the night, meaning early in the morning before it gets light, and the ashmores, the minhag is to in fact do nefilas apayim shu karav al-yom, because that's already close to the day. So very, very late at night, which is early in the morning, right before it gets light, even though it's dark, even though we don't normally do nefilas apayim balayla, here you could do it because it's already karav al-yom. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Sifkaton Tez Zayin, ein nefilas apayim at night, ve'atam al pi kabbalah. Just like we said about not saying standing up without pi kabbalah, so too over here the Mishnah Berurah tells us the reason why you shouldn't do the nefilas apayim at night is al pi kabbalah, because the midas hadin is there. Ayim v'beis Yosef. V'lomar ha-mizmor shel nefilas apayim ein chashash afilu balayla. However, to say the actual tefillah of tachanun without nefilas apayim, there is no concern al pi kabbalah even at night. Sifkaton yud zayin balayla. V'lochein in nimshacha tfilas ha-mincha ar halayla. Therefore, if the davening of mincha gets extended into the nighttime, ein noflin al panehem. You do not say tachanun when the nefilas apayim if the mincha gets delayed and it's already nighttime. However, then he adds in a very important line, ubein hashmashos shalayla nohagan lipo. But bein hashmashos of the night, the minhag is to do nefilas apayim. Now in our shuls, when we're davening at a minyan that's 15 minutes before Shkia, even if you wait a while till the minyan comes, the ma'aseh by the time you finish mincha, it is after Shkia, but it's always during bein hashmashos. So according to the Mishnah Berurah, even though we don't do nefilas apayim at night, that's not considered night. You would still do nefilas apayim, because as he says, bein hashmashos shalayla nohagan lipo, that would certainly be considered bein hashmashos. If you look at note number 20, he writes, "Ube'inyan haminag b'Yerushalayim." However, the minhag in Yerushalayim says, Rav Yoshev, she'ein noflim al pneim la'achar shkias hachama. Period. There is no nefilas apayim after shkia. So as opposed to what the Mishnah Berurah says, but in Yerushalayim says Rav Yoshev, there's no nefilas apayim after shkia. Ubir Hagon Shom Zaman Arbach shechashashu l'das hamukubalim sheyesh sakana laomro mishkia sachama ve'elof v'chamira sakanta. The Shom Zaman says the concern is for the mukubalim that say that there's a sakana to say it after shkia, and therefore, right, sakana is very chamer, and therefore the minhag in Yerushalayim is not to say it after shkia at all. Why we're only worried about that sakana in Yerushalayim, not other places, I don't know, but that's what Shom Zaman says. The minhag, I think, at least in the shuls that I've been at, is that they're not makbar on this, and that when the minyan of mincha goes past shkia, even though, since it is still Ben Hashmashos, they do in fact do Nefilas Apayim, which the Mishnah Berurah paskins. But then the Mishnah Berurah says something interesting, which seems to be a little bit of a stira. He's quoting a different shita. He's quoting the Magen Avraham, not the Taz, but he writes, "Ubiyomim she'omrim Avinu Malkeinu b'mincha." On days in which we're saying Avinu Malkeinu at mincha, yuchol ledaleg Avinu Malkeinu kedei lipo mibod yom. You could skip Avinu Malkeinu in order to get the tachnu and the Nefilas Apayim mibod yom. So it sounds from this line that we're skipping Avinu Malkeinu in order to get the Nefilas Apayim while it's still day. Sounds like the other option was it would have been during Ben Hashmashos. We just said Ben Hashmashos is okay. So does this Shita argue with that and say Ben Hashmashos is not okay? Because he doesn't say, Yuchol dag Avinu Malkeinu k'dei lipo during Ben Hashmashos. He says Mibod Yom. So first he was mashma, quoting the Taz, that wasn't mashma, it was mefurish, that Ben Hashmashos shalayla, you are no hagam lipo. But then he says, on days that we're saying Avinu Malkeinu at mincha, you can still Avinu Malkeinu to get it even during the day. So you could work them out together and say, dafka to get it from Ben Hashmashos to Yom, then you would skip Avinu Malkeinu, but you still could do it during Ben Hashmashos. It's not necessarily a stira, but it's certainly a little bit of a different implication in the second line that we're quoting the Magen Avraham versus the first line that says straight up that Ben Hashmashos you can be noheg to do Nefilas Apayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah Vayter in Sefkot and Yudches. We said the reason why we are lenient when it comes to Leili Ashmores and we are noheg to do Nefilas Apayim because it is Karov Layom. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ubal Yerabah Hevi Lohakel Mechatzos Ubahalon. The Yerabah brings down that we can be lenient from Chatzos Halayla and onwards, V'chein Mashem Magen Avram. So it's not just the early morning hours when it's still dark, but it's all the way from Chatzos and onward. At that point, there is less of a Midas Hadin around, and therefore that would be a time that you already could be lenient to say, Tachnu in the Nefilas Apayim, so Kodin Yotes Layom, V'yesh Nohagin, Laharich v'slichos ad nechon hayom v'oz yiplu al pneim. Some of them, when they're saying slichos ba'ashmores before it gets light, that they extend the slichos till it becomes day, and then they do nefilas apayim. So they can be during the day. Ach erev Rosh Hashanah lo yitachei minhag zeh. However, on erev Rosh Hashanah, where it's a long slichos, you wouldn't gain anything by doing that. You shouldn't do this. Why? Sharei ein nofun al pneim erev Rosh Hashanah. Because we don't do nefilas apayim on erev Rosh Hashanah. In other words, there's no tachnun on erev Rosh Hashanah. We only say tachnun by the slichos. So if you're going to bedafka leave the slichos longer to get the tachnun during erev Rosh Hashanah, when it's light outside, so there will be no tachanun then. Now, even though we paskin in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah that we do say tachanun even on Erev Rosh Hashanah with the slichos if it goes into the day, that's what the Mishnah Berurah says, because usually it's finished before the day. So if one time it goes into the day, so it's okay. But if you're going to plan it officially that every time you're going to leave it, not like we do this anyway, but according to the Mishnah Berurah, if you're going to leave it every time and delay the slichos in order to say Nefilas Apayim when it's daytime, so you're not gaining. You can't say it at night, and you can't say it at Rosh Hashanah. The whole idea to say it at Rosh Hashanah is if one time it gets extended, usually it's earlier, so you can do it now later. But if you're going to plan it and always do it later, that will be a problem of saying the Nefilas Apayim at Rosh Hashanah, and that we don't do. And therefore he says, even though it's a nice eitzah to extend the slichos in general to the altitude of the Nefilas Apayim when it's actually day, on Rosh Hashanah, one should not do that because you lose more than you gain. That is the end of Sif Gimel. And Sif Daled will read the Mechaber, but we'll pick up on the Mishnah Berurah tomorrow. The Mechaber says in Sif Daled, Nogu shelo lipol al paneim lo bebeis ha'ovel, velo bebeis ha'chosan, velo bebeis ha'kneses biyomila, velo k'shiyesham chosan. Says the Shulchan Aruch, the minhag is not to do nefilas apayim, not to say tachanun, not in the house of an ovel, not in the house of a chosan, not in a beis ha'kneses the day of a milah, and not when there is a chosan in shul. And we'll pick up with the Ramah and Mitzvah Shem tomorrow, and the Mishnah Berurah tomorrow. We'll get into all the times where we don't say slichos when there's a bris, when the bali bris are there, when the chassan is there, should he be there, should he not be there? Many interesting halachos, many interesting shaylas that we'll discuss in Mitzvah Shem tomorrow when we go back to our regular time at 8 o'clock.
You have been listening to a shiur from shasilluminated.org. For other shiurim on many topics, or to hear an Iyun shiur on any daf in Shas, including Mareh Mekomos on each shiur, please visit www.shasilluminated.org. To order CDs or for more information, please call 203-312-SHAS. That's 203-312-7427, or email info@shasilluminated.org.